A spokesman for the Condo Association released this statement. The board retained experts and trusted experts, and at no time were they told of imminent threat of danger or collapse.
Fox's Phil Keating, Florida's state attorney, announcing she plans to create a grand jury to study the collapse. The White House confirming that President Biden will visit Surfside Thursday to meet with rescue workers and family members. A big blunder in the vote counting in New York's Democratic mayoral primary.
Election officials retracting their latest report on the vote count. They say the count was corrupted by test data never cleared from a computer system. The vote count is weeks in the making because it's the first time New York's used ranked choice voting, where you can choose your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth choice for mayor. There was no ranked choice voting in the Republican primary because there were only two candidates.
Fox's Gary Baumgarten. Texas ready to execute Wednesday. John Hummel convicted of killing his pregnant wife, young daughter, and father a dozen years ago. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The U.S. Supreme Court issuing two more rulings Tuesday, and the next to the last announcement expected this term.
The Supreme Court has declined to lift the CDC's pandemic-related eviction ban. That moratorium is set to expire on July 31st. That vote 5-4. Justice is also ruling that people who are deported and then re-enter the U.S. illegally, then claim asylum, have to stay in custody until their cases are handled. And then Thursday, we are expecting the final two opinions of the term on voting rights and whether some groups, including many political groups, can be forced to reveal the names of their donors.
Fox's Shannon Bream. About a dozen deaths in Washington State and Oregon may be tied to the intense heat wave that's brought scorching temperatures to the Pacific Northwest. Consecutive days of record-high temperatures exceeding 100 have eased in Seattle and Portland, but inland Spokane saw 109 degrees on Tuesday, the highest temperature ever recorded there. One power utility is imposing rolling blackouts because of the heavy demand. The state of California is extending its business travel bans for state employees to several states over political differences.
17, the number of states where California employees and athletes for colleges and universities cannot travel to because California objects to laws in those states that allegedly discriminate against LGBTQ people. So the state attorney general says, quote, make no mistake, we're in the midst of a wave of bigotry and discrimination, and California is not going to support it. Originally, Democrats in Sacramento objected to so-called bathroom bills. The latest outrage for California relates to those laws that prevent transgender girls from participating in sports consistent with their gender identity. So basically, state employees cannot go to conferences in 17 other states.
Fox's William Lajeunesse reports there could be more coming as several states are considering legislation opposed by LGBTQ groups. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. Go back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Get your shot and win big prizes, Guam. The Office of the Governor and the Guam Visitors Bureau presents Vaccine Win Guam. Protect our community by getting your shot and enter online at visitguam.com/vax for a chance to win. Starting June 14th to July 21st, we'll be giving away weekly prizes of $10,000 cash and a brand new car to lucky residents who are fully vaccinated. That's 6 weeks of Vaccine Win opportunities. Some conditions apply. Log on to visitguam.com/vax for official promo rules or to submit your entry today. Let's Vaccine Win, Guam!
Hafaday, this is Congressman St. Nicholas. Your congressional office would like to remind you that pandemic unemployment assistance is set to expire on September 6th of this year. We encourage the people of Guam to seek out active employment as much as possible, as jobs continue to remain limited, and we want to prevent hardship for our people at the conclusion of the PUA program. Thank you, and see to us, Mahasi.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of the people to listen to and comment on tall tales shall not be infringed. An extremely important right and part of your personal freedom here in this great country of the United States of America. So we kick off another episode of Tall Tales today, as usual, by going to the Daily News, who has played against type here recently and actually had a couple of good editorials.
Woohoo!
Today doesn't happen to be one of those days.
Boo.
If you can't think about anything else to write about as far as an editorial is concerned, talk about the Wuhan virus and the necessity to continue to be careful. That you can do that about once a week, right? And here's the Daily News. Our view: despite progress, virus is still dangerous and deadly. That's it. You know, they took a page and a half to say this. So we all know that. We all know that coronavirus, as you were, the Wuhan virus, can kill you.
Bob, this just in. It's raining outside.
Uh-oh.
Be careful.
Be careful. Yeah. Thank you, Jose. I'll do that if I go outside. I may not even go outside.
Do I get a blue star?
You do. Yeah, so we know this. We know that 140 people on the island have died from Wuhan virus. Well, at least we think that might be the case. We still remember Andrew Camacho's explanation of, do you remember that? No. Andrew Camacho posited this hypothetical case. A man was despondent, so he took some really strong poison. He didn't know if that would kill him, so he went up to Two Lovers Point, and he jumped off the cliff at Two Lovers Point. When he hit the water, he was already dead. A shark came along and devoured almost all of him, except for his nose. The fire rescue folks were able to fish his nose out of the ocean. They took it to the lab, tested it. It tested positive for Wuhan virus. Therefore, he was counted as one who died from the Wuhan virus. That's kind of how we kept the statistics there. Yeah, we know that. Keep wearing your mask. Make sure you wear your mask. When you go to sleep, make sure you wear your mask. Be safe. You know, if you happen to go to a drive-in movie, make sure you keep your seat belts on during the time you're in the drive-in movie.
Don't forget clean underwear.
Yeah, wear your bathing suit in the shower. You know, I mean, come on, Daily News. You can do better than that. You've done better than that. Okay, then we go to the Post. And the Post is right on the money with their editorial. They're speaking about an issue that is of great importance to all of us. It has been discussed at some length. We have a bill pending before the legislature, and here's what they say. Here's what the Post says. Medical malpractice reform advocates, opponents must find middle ground. Sometimes some of the most sensible ideas can spring from casual conversations. We're talking about the senator's latest attempt to reform the MMAA. We've heard loud and clear from some very vocal Guam doctors who have threatened to uproot their Guam clinics and leave the island if the law will change and open the floodgates for patients or their advocates to sue doctors directly. As it stands, patients or their families must spend the added time and costs of going through an out-of-court arbitration process before they can take their grievance to court. On the other end of the spectrum are patients or families who want a straighter path to hold doctors accountable via a lawsuit if things go wrong, without being constrained by the required arbitration. And there have been times when life-saving efforts can go awry. Despite the lack of intent to harm, things can go wrong in a hospital, a clinic, or operating rooms. Surgical equipment has been left inside a person's body post-surgery. A baby's finger has been lost, and a boy's life has been cut short, allegedly without being given the full urgent medical attention to save him at a pediatric ward. These are but a few examples of healthcare horror stories on Guam that have been recently sparked new efforts to call for reforming the mandatory arbitration requirement before a medical malpractice claim can progress into Guam's court system. Some of the pro-reform side of the aisle believe the arbitration shield that doctors use to avoid being sued directly needs to change to balance the scale between patients needing careful, thorough health care and doctors' needs to not be hit with frivolous lawsuits so they can continue their medical practices. First, we must acknowledge that not all doctors are driven by the monetary gain first and helping to save lives second. So that's true, but so what? Does that make it any different? Should we have a separate set of rules for people who want to go into business and make a profit and make a lot of money and recover their investment than we do for people who say, well, the money's not what really motivates me. I want to help people. The second group are the ones that are down at the legislature. Yeah, that is not a real dichotomy. We would like to believe that a lot of our doctors take to heart their Hippocratic oaths to treat the sick to the best of their ability. Why not start out with the proposition that they all do? Why are Guam doctors so concerned with the prospect of lifting the arbitration requirement before a medical malpractice lawsuit can proceed? I've explained that, I think, fairly clearly. We gained a better understanding of this through casual observations with a few doctors who shy from the public spotlight. I'll bet that I know who that was. The doctor who shied from the public spotlight. I'll do a Joe Biden, okay? Tom Shea. What do you think, Jose?
That's not how you spell shy.
Shay and shy, two different things. That's true, yeah. From these conversations, we learn more details about the impact of the lack of Guam medical doctors who practice in certain specialized fields. So a couple of doctors slipped into the Post editorial boardroom and whispered into the ears of the editorial writers, but they don't want to be identified. The island doesn't have the market size to support a lot of the physicians' specialized skills. And because Guam lacks doctors in specialized fields of care, it's not uncommon for some of the island's doctors to go beyond their expertise just so someone who needs urgent assistance will get some level of care. And I mentioned the other day, gosh, I had the guy's name right on the tip of my tongue. the doctor who was up at, let me go through this and maybe it'll come.
Oh, the one is no longer here.
Yeah. I had his name right on the tip of my tongue. And because Guam lacks doctors in specialized fields of care, it's not uncommon for some of the island's doctors to go beyond their expertise just so someone who needs urgent assistance will get some level of care. It might come as a surprise that some Guam doctors would go out of their way to help a patient beyond their fields of expertise, risking their licenses and livelihoods. But the next option would be to let a patient suffer without medical care if that patient cannot afford to pay for the cost of travel to see a specialist off island. It's a tough spot for the doctors and the patients. But we also note the clamor from patient advocates to lift some of the cost prohibitions patients and their families face when seeking justice. We can only hope that senators looking at possible reforms to the law, as well as patient advocates and caring Guam doctors, can find common ground with the best interests of the patients in mind, as well as allowing doctors to continue their practices. There may be others who have more ideas to share, and this opening and meeting of minds can happen only if both sides can let sensible thought prevail. The doctor's name I'm trying to remember was up at a skilled nursing facility. His name will come to me, I'm sure. And there was a patient there who was having trouble breathing. So this doctor performed an emergency tracheotomy and got the patient to the hospital. He ultimately died, but the doctor was disciplined. And I think he was even sued because this was not his area of expertise. So I can understand that. You know, you're a doctor. You've got your little black bag there with, you know, a lifetime supply of aspirins in it and the other things that doctors need, that big shiny reflector, your stethoscope, etc. A laundry ticket for the 3 white coats that are still in the laundry. So you're watching someone who's going to die if he doesn't get a tracheotomy. And you know how to do a tracheotomy. You've stood in on these before. You've got a scalpel, et cetera, but you're not a surgeon. You're not a respirator, whatever you're supposed to be. So what do? Stand there and watch the guy die? Now, the way American law works, put aside doctors for a second, in American law, there is no duty to rescue. If you're walking past, and this is gruesome, but if you're walking past a swimming pool and you see a 3-year-old in that swimming pool floundering around and who's going to drown because he can't swim, you don't have a duty to fish that child out of there. However, once you start the rescue, then you better stick with it, because if you start the rescue and you abandon it, then you're in a heap of trouble. So the doctor in my story here didn't have a duty. I don't think had a duty to this person. But what are you going to do? You know, what are you going to do? So these are some interesting points that the editorial makes, and I think I've probably addressed similar points as we go along with this. I think this is one of the most important issues that Dr. Steele, that was who it was, yeah. Helen Milton, Dr. Steele was the doctor in the skilled nursing facility. And he'd been on the island forever, Dr. Steele, and he left after this. You know, the classic example of no good deed goes unpunished.
So when was mandatory arbitration first enacted on Guam?
Back in '75.
So this happened to Dr. Steele after that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then that first law was declared unconstitutional. We came back with a second one that's still in place. And I think Dr. Steele's incident was maybe no longer than 10 years ago. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty recent.
Yeah, pretty recent.
But we are the only, Guam is the only territory or state that has mandatory arbitration.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
There's a really, if you go to the Post for, let's see, what day was this? I think it was Sunday. Pros and cons of Bill 112 Wade. And there's a column there that shows what you must do to bring a medical malpractice claim under current law and then claims under 112. And under the current law, the American Arbitration Association has a sliding fee schedule that depends on the size of the claim. A filing fee alone reaches $10,000 for claims that are $1 million or more, or if the claimant does not state the amount of the claim, 10 grand. A party may request a trial de novo, new trial, in court within 30 days after the arbitration award is served. To prevail, and this is something, the appealing party must improve upon the arbitration award by 40%. I mentioned this a couple days ago. Arbitration award is $1 million. You say, you know, my case is worth $2 million. I'm going to sue. I can sue now. I've done the arbitration. You waltz out of there with a judgment of $1 million, of just $1 million, because you didn't improve on the arbitration award by 40%. Here's what happens to you. You are going to owe the attorney's fees for the prevailing party, which after the arbitration and after the trial de novo are going to be very extensive. Sanctions imposed against a plaintiff will be deducted from any award rendered, and sanctions against a defendant will be added to any award rendered. So that's the current system. I think we all understand how the current system works. You have three people, one of whom is a lawyer, one of whom is a doctor, one of whom is a real person, just a regular person. And in order to get it to come prevail in arbitration, the vote, you have to get two of the arbitrators to go your way. The arbitrators hear the evidence, determine the amount of the award, and rule for the prevailing party. So there's an article that ran in the Post today, public input still open as medical malpractice reform moves forward. Vice Speaker Tina Munya Barnes is so far the only co-sponsor to publicly withdraw support for Bill 112. And I got to stop here for a second and relate an autobiographical experience here, and then I'm going to peek in my political prism here for a second. I was fortunate enough to be a delegate to the Republican National Convention at Madison Square Garden in 2004. And I, of course, was interested in what was going on the floor, but I was really interested in the mechanics of everything that went on. There were like 6 or 7 different teams with different colored shirts that did different things in the Madison Square Garden during the Coliseum. One team was in charge of props, so that when the program went in a particular direction, all of the delegates had the right kind of props in their hands to emphasize the message that was being conveyed by the speaker. As an example, when John Kerry's name, when it was apparent that we were going to be talking about John Kerry and the other candidate, guys, and I think they were in green shirts, came through the entire Madison Square Garden with cardboard jories about yay high. These cardboard cutouts that looked like jories or jory, right? So at the right time, I don't remember who the speaker was. He said, you remember John Kerry. He was the guy that was for the Vietnam War before he was against it. What do you call that? And everybody, flip, flop, flip, flop, flip, as they threw these stories back and forth, right? Seeing Tina's name in this article reminded me of that.
Flip-flop.
Tina Flip-flop, right? Yeah. She was for it before she was against it, right? And I'm going to look in my political prism here right now. You know, we've got Tina, who is the turncoat, who was a co-sponsor of the bill, and then said, no, because Therese was not upfront with me about speaking with the doctors. I'm bailing out, so you can call me Bailout Barnes from now on if you want to. So Bailout Barnes sends a letter to Tina saying, I'm not going to support your bill anymore. And I went through how cleverly she put that together. She must have started on May 24th to put together her list of co-signers, her June 1st letter, which she waited until Therese had her first informational session. Tina comes waltzing into the session hall and throws a stink bomb in there. And it worked really well because Tina got the front page of the Daily News next day. So Tina so far is the only one. Bailout Barnes is the only one so far that has decided she's not going to support Bill 112 after having co-sponsored, leaving, I think, 10 total sponsors behind. So I look through my political prism, and you'll recall my political prism filters out everything except for political considerations. It filters out ethics, morals, legality, manners, customs, whatever, and leaves only the political behind. And my analysis is this, that when this is all over, there will, as always, be winners and losers. Therese Terlahi is going to come out of this winners. Because if the bill passes, then Therese was the champion of the ever-popular little guy. Therese was the populist. Therese was the one who recognized class warfare when she saw it, and she said, I'm not going to back the deep pockets. If the bill is voted down, doesn't make any difference. Therese is still the champion of the little guy, and she can say, you know, here's why justice was not served. Their names are right over here, right? If the bill doesn't pass, Tina is not going to be given the same kind of reception. Tina is going to be seen as the tool of the deep pockets, and she's going to be seen as one, and, you know, Joe Q. Public, Joe Sixpack, values integrity. You know, if you tell Joe Sixpack, I'm going to come over and help you bush cut your yard tomorrow, and you don't show up, well, it's not going to cause a fight or anything like that. He's probably not going to take you off his Christmas card list, but there's a mark beside your name. People value integrity. So when you come out and you say, I'm in favor of this, and then later on you say, well, that was then, but this is now. That's not good for a politician. So Tina's going to come out of this loser regardless of what happens to this bill. Therese is going to come out winners. And this may be the beginning of an entirely new path for Therese as I look through my political spectrum. because Therese has an opportunity to establish her populist credentials. And Therese, like everybody else on the island, if they think about it, knows that there are 3 times more people in the private sector than there are in the public sector. So we're ready for a huge paradigm shift here. Governor Leon Guerrero still has her 1972 playbook, which says, whatever you do, you got to make sure that the government employees are happy. Don't give out that RISE Act unless you give it to the government employees too. Give them the day off after Thanksgiving, and you got that's a where are you going to get those votes if you don't give them from? Anyhow, that's the 1972 playbook. But a clever politician who has good populist credentials could say, I'm not going to be the senator from Gov Guam. I'm going to be the senator for the people, and I've shown you that. Or maybe change the script a little bit. I'm not going to be the governor from Gov Guam. I'm going to be the governor for all the people. So this could be a real watershed for Therese Terlahi's political career, because I think she's latched on to an issue that's going to have legs for a long, long time. Okay, go back to this article here that ran in the Post. Now, let me take a short break here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Subway double dares you to take the wrap at Subway. Protein packed with double meat for double the flavor. Oh yeah, this is the way to wrap. Choose the smoky, creamy goodness of the turkey, bacon, and guacamole folded in a tomato basil wrap. Or go for the hot one, Chipotle Southwest steak and cheese tucked in a light spinach wrap. However which way you want to pack the protein, these are the wraps you'll be happy to take. Subway, eat fresh.
Subway double meat wraps are available at all Subway locations, including the newly opened Subway NCS right outside the gate.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Vice Speaker Tina Barnes is so far the only co-sponsor to publicly withdraw support for Bill 112, the proposed replacement to Guam's medical malpractice, as you were the Guam's MMAA Act. I don't know why they have to mention Guam in this story. Would we think that they're writing about Texas if they didn't put Guam in there?
It's because of the insular cases, Bob.
I guess, yeah. But other sponsors are keeping an eye on public input as well as recommendations that may improve the bill as it makes its way through the legislative process. Also known as the Medical Malpractice Pretrial Screening Act, Bill 112 intends to replace mandatory arbitration with a confidential pretrial screening process before a magistrate judge. Arbitration and mediation are still options to parties during the screening process. Opponents of the mandatory arbitration law argue that the high cost of arbitration deters people from filing legitimate claims. Guam is the only jurisdiction that has this stringent arbitration mandate regarding medical malpractice. But testimony from the medical community has almost entirely expressed concerns with 112. Healthcare professionals claim that repealing mandatory arbitration will make practicing on Guam too costly, or will make certain practices too risky, and will result in fewer medical services for patients. Barnes said she initially supported Bill 112 because she was told that Speaker Therese Terlahi spoke to the medical community, but later received calls to the contrary. Terlahi has disputed allegations that she did not seek input from doctors. So there we go. Yeah. Barnes versus Terlahi. Co-sponsor Senator Chris Dueñas said his initial support was predicated on information presented by the main sponsor. He did not retract his support as he answered questions on Bill 112, but said he looks forward to upcoming public hearings so he can make an educated decision and properly weigh the options of this bill. It's important that my colleagues and I all get as much information as possible so we can address any issues and make changes before the final legislation reaches the session floor for debate, Dueñas said. We will all see what the bill looks like in its final format, and I look forward to discussing it with my clients. Well, that sounds like, you know, is there an exit around? I don't see a sign that says, I'm going to stay here, but, yeah. Co-sponsor Senator Joe St. Augustine said he will continue to support the proposal with proper amendments to ensure there's a balanced platform for patients and healthcare providers. While the intent of 112 was to provide protections for patients, it may not provide a balanced platform for both patients and medical providers, he said. It's our duty and priority to ensure the safety of our people. But we also must make sure the people that we're protecting are not harmed by the legislation. The recent information hearing and testimony already received have yielded several suggestions, including capping damages, as well as including a medical professional to screen claims. Capping damages, you know, I don't think there's a complete understanding here of the old saying that, you know, this is what people will trot out as far as criminal law is concerned, but it's equally applicable here. In criminal law, for some people, the process is the punishment. Being arrested, tossed in the pokey, being brought before the magistrate, being bailed out with significant conditions of release, on and on and on, looking for your lawyer. So you get all the way down, and before the trial, the prosecution gives you what appears to be a really favorable deal, and you take it. People say, man, you really got off easy. No, I didn't get off easy. The process sometimes is the punishment. And for doctors who are sued for medical malpractice, even if they prevail in the merits, or even if their insurance company gets them a favorable settlement, once again, the process is the punishment. Doctors are, like a lot of professionals, not lawyers, certainly not me. Doctors are, have pride. They don't like to have people come along and say, you did something wrong, especially if they didn't do anything wrong. So doctors are a proud group. And some lawyers are too, not me. Not you know that I'm very proud of my humility, right? Right, Jose? Yeah, very good, Jose. You got it. Yeah.
I had to make it louder.
All right. So I don't see that as capping damages. No matter what the damages are, it's going to be the kind of experience that for a doctor is going to be horrible. Something that he would never want to do if he could possibly avoid it. Including a medical professional to screen claims at the pretrial stage in Teresa's bill, as far as Teresa's bill is concerned. Well, one of the problems we have is doctors here on the island don't like to come forward and speak ill of other doctors. It's a very small community. And if you come along and say, yeah, Dr. So-and-so, yeah, that was professional malpractice, you're going to run into that guy for the rest of your career, and it's not going to be fun. So when we do get into this malpractice situation, it's probably going to be necessary to bring someone from off-island. if you have that doctor in the screening process, you know, this is, as I contemplate it, Teresa's got a magistrate. The two lawyers come before the magistrate. They present their cases. This is not like sitting around down at Denny's or Two Ray or something like that. Say, well, yeah, I see what you mean, but you don't remember. You know, it's not the way it works. It's very, when you're in front of a guy with a black robe, it's very formalized. There are rules that apply. I would see introducing a doctor in that process is really at cross purposes with what Teresa's trying to come up with. She's going to substitute one really complicated process for another one. It's going to be time consuming, and it's going to be expensive. You know, when a lawyer comes to court, he turns on his meter, and someone's got to pay for that time on the meter. It doesn't make much difference whether the lawyer is talking to a doctor, the judge, the other lawyer, or whatever. I don't know what the going rate is now. I think it's probably around $350 an hour. And I know this. They pay lawyers more than they pay talk show hosts. Yeah. And they're probably not as good at what they do.
But they don't have as many fans.
That's very true. They don't have as much fun either. Yeah. All right. The recent information, hearing, and testimony already received, these suggestions are not without criticism either, but the speaker said she intends to incorporate suggestions that don't burden the taxpayers. That's a refreshing thought. For example, regarding the screening process before a magistrate judge, Titlahi said she wanted to find a low-cost means to handle cases and avoid supplemental taxpayer support, which appeared to be needed with competing suggestions to simply fund certain arbitration costs using a revolving government fund. Part of the medical community's concern with Bill 112 involves the island's limited treatment resources. Some doctors have practiced beyond their specific training or specialties to assist patients, such as an adult specialist treating children, because there's no pediatric counterpart on island. This potentially exposes them to malpractice claims. Because of this issue, there's a concern that a magistrate judge untrained in health care. No, judges aren't trained in anything. They aren't even trained in the law. You know, training and education are not the same thing. Untrained in healthcare won't be able to properly discern whether there was a breach of the standard of care, although the legal standard is the same under Bill 112. Well, that's why you have lawyers. Lawyers call expert witnesses to establish the standard of care, whether you do it before a magistrate or do it before a judge. The Guam Seventh-day Adventist Clinic wrote to patients in June notifying them that in preparation of possible action regarding 112, the clinic had begun taking steps to focus its care to the strict scope of practice of their staff. That might mean many patients will need to travel off-island for specialty care, according to the clinic. It's our hope this bill will not pass, as we believe it will have a negative impact on health care delivery on Guam. Senator Tello Taitabi, I'm in trouble now. I mentioned Tello's name without her permission, said letters like the SDA notice have caused constituents to fear publicly supporting the measure. Medical providers who support changing the arbitration law have asked that their names not be mentioned publicly for fear of retaliation, she added. So we've got the cancel culture right here on Guam. These letters and announcements are very unethical and unfortunate. It breaks my heart to discover how some, not all doctors feel about the Hippocratic Oath to our community. Unfortunately, my cardiologist said that he couldn't entertain my claim of a broken heart because it's outside the bounds of his own specialty. I was personally given a Dear John letter from my doctor who has been monitoring my blood levels. Let's see.
He's up to here.
Yeah, well, he looked at the gauge. Tell him you're around about a half tank. You probably need to fill up. It's not good to be running around with less than a full tank of blood.
I hear she's running on fumes.
Overall, the senator said she will continue to support Bill 112. Tidegui and the Speaker were among the first names associated with the recent medical malpractice tort reform efforts, which began with information hearings in 2019 and the introduction of Bill 112's predecessor just before the end of the 35th. It took almost 2 years of research and dialogue to provide what I consider to be a balance for both our community and medical providers. Tidegui said, "This bill is not perfect, but it's a good start in our efforts to correct what has been an unfair process for those seeking justice from an injury sustained through medical malpractice or, even worse, the death of a loved one." Meanwhile, a personal experience predicated Senator Jose Terlahi's sponsorship of Bill 112. Spoiler alert, this doesn't relate to any injuries suffered by any of his relatives in Jeepgate. As far as we know, nobody got hurt at Jeepgate, right? Terlahi said, "My brother died as a result of medical malpractice. It's a pain that I don't wish on any family. We were never able to seek justice because the costs were too high," Senator Jose Terlahi said. "If justice is only available to the very wealthy, then something needs to change, because that is not justice in any sense of the word." Now here we go again, throwing around the J word, which means the result I want, right? Nonetheless, lawmakers owe it to the community to listen to all perspectives in good faith, and no one's concern should be discounted, he said. Co-sponsor Senator Joanne Brown said she supports Bill 112. Speaker Terlahi did a good job in putting together a measure that raises the standard of health care on island and has done an excellent job in educating the public even after our colleague pulled her support of the measure prior to the public hearings. I've said this myself. I really compliment Therese for the education that she's brought forward on this. And Senator Brown, is a lot more diplomatic than I am. But there's just no question about it. This very calculated plan to throw a stink bomb in that informational hearing and do the best that she could to take the oxygen out of the room, and she was very successful.
30-plus pages of counter signatures.
Yeah.
Not a small feat.
Not a small feat. Yeah. Senator Therese Terlahi recently held a press conference on Bill 112 in which she addressed concerns. She repeated some of those statements in her response to the Post. "I have spent many hours of painstaking research to find a good compromise to grant access to justice for all our members of our community, continue very special protections for doctors not available in other jurisdictions, and to expressly continue the current standard of care, which is the basis for determination of malpractice," the Speaker said. She invited the entire island community to attend public hearings on July 7 and 12. Now, do you have a boo sound effect, Jose? Boo! Yeah, all right. Listed co-sponsors who did not respond to Post inquiries about whether they will continue to support the measure and what they think of the community input so far are Senator Tony Atta, boo! Senator Talina Nelson, boo! I understand Senator Talina Nelson gave the reporter a copy of the Organic Act. Amanda Shelton, boo! Sabina Paris, boo! Clint Rigel. So what? You guys don't want to get involved? Well, you don't want to get your hands dirty. You want to preserve your ability to Lena and Amanda so when the roll is called and to vote for Bill 112, you can pass 3 times and keep people in suspense because they will know that you haven't decided what you're going to do. You know, the idea of being open with the media, like Therese has been, and educating the public as to what's going on in your position. This is not some niggling detail that keeps you from doing the really important work of being a senator. It is the important work of being a senator. Now, it's probably not as much fun as sitting around drafting resolutions, going to cookie-pushing events like ribbon cuttings and presenting resolutions and all the rest of this stuff. But it's the reason that you ran for office in the first place. So if you don't want to tell us what your position is on probably the most important bill that's come along in a long time, fine. Keep it to yourself. Okay, let's take a short break here and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Hafaday, I'm Jermaine Alerta. For Pride Month, I encourage everyone to support the Isa Guam LGBTQ Scholarship at the UOG Endowment Foundation. The scholarship was founded to help young LGBTQ students achieve their academic goals. With your help, LGBTQ students who are facing challenges will be able to continue their education and make a positive impact on our island. Please visit give.uog.edu or call 735-2957 for more information on how you can empower these future leaders of Guam.
Okay, so here we are. Let's see, I think the next hearing is on July the 7th and the 12th, I think. And I expect that these hearings are going to be quite interesting. My suspicion or my expectation is that there will be some people coming down and testifying that the doctors would wish stayed home. You know, I know some people that have really gotten the fuzzy end of the lollipop on this whole medical malpractice thing. And some of them may very well come forward. So if you consider it, what we have here, and I just want to try to define the issue in such a manner that I take the pizzazz out of it. I put the Tabasco bottle away and just give you some really good bland food. On the one hand, we have people who say, if you can't get into court, if it costs you more money than you'll ever have in one time in your life, which is true for a lot of people. Most people will never have $50,000 in one handful in their entire lifetime. They would look on a stack of $50,000 as a fortune. So on the one hand, we have people who are saying that no matter what the doctor does, he can't be held liable for the harm that he caused me, my mother, sister, brother, father, whatever. So if we don't have access to our courts, do we really have the rule of law? And I talk about that all the time here on the show. You know, the one thing that when the United States took over Guam after the end of the Spanish-American War, it took a long time, but one thing we have here is the rule of law. which an awful lot of countries don't have. So we have neutral, impartial courts. We have a bar made up of relatively, probably very skilled attorneys, considering our small size. And if you look at the courthouse, if you look at the law says the courthouse is always open. It really does. Unless you're a doctor who committed malpractice. So on the one hand, there's this idea that in a just society, when someone does wrong to somebody else, that is, when one party engages in tortious conduct and then harms another party, the party who suffered the harm has a remedy, and it's called a civil suit. But the folks on that side are saying, what kind of remedy is a civil suit if I would never, ever have enough money in my whole life to be able to get in the front door of the courthouse? That's no remedy at all. So in a sense, what it means is that I and people like me are at the mercy of a doctor who does not exercise ordinary care in my care, in taking care of me. Now, we're assuming that there aren't any bad actors out there in the medical community. We're assuming that there aren't any people who hold themselves out as doctors who don't have the requisite level of competence to be doctors. But even if that's the case, doctors occasionally make mistakes. So I mentioned before that our system of tort law is a loss redistribution device. It redistributes the loss from the person upon which it fell to the person who caused it. So you don't have to be a bad person to be found liable in a civil case. But if the doctor causes the loss, then the loss redistribution aspects of tort law would reassign that loss back to the doctor. And folks on that side over there, on the justice side, are saying, doctors make an awful lot of money. That would be one side of it. And I have this clever Latin maxim that I whip out from time to time to amuse and amaze you. Fiat justitia ruit caelum. Let justice be done if the heavens fall. In other words, justice is so important that when a court rules in a just fashion, regardless of what the collateral damages or the consequences to other people are, let justice be done if the heavens fall. The doctors are coming back and saying, we're pragmatic. We understand what we're saying, what you're saying, but we're a small island. We're a long ways away from the mainland. Okay, we got a break for the big halftime show. I'm going to wrap this up, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Matson versus APL and the Jones Act.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Another day with no survivors found. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. As rescue crews continue to dig through the rubble of the Surfside, Florida condominium building that collapsed Thursday morning. This rescue worker admits it's taking an emotional toll.
It's hard not to put yourself in that situation, not to put yourself in the position that these families are in. We start thinking about it in that way, and that what would I do how hard are we going to work to save our family members if something like this would happen.
Another body was found yesterday, the 12th known victim. The list of those unaccounted for now stands at 149. Another possible problem is brewing. The National Hurricane Center says there are 2 tropical disturbances in the Caribbean that have the potential to develop into tropical storms that could reach South Florida. President Biden and the First Lady will travel to Surfside tomorrow.
They want to thank the heroic first responders, search and rescue teams, and everyone who's been working tirelessly around the clock, and meet with the families who have been forced to endure this terrible tragedy.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, Florida's state attorney, says a special grand jury will examine the causes of the collapse and consider whether criminal charges are warranted. Another month without rent checks for many landlords in the country. The U.S. Supreme Court letting stand a Centers for Disease Control moratorium on evictions because of the coronavirus. The administration recently extended that ban until the end of July, but plans to let it expire then. The justices also ruled that persons deported from the country who then sneak back in seeking asylum are not entitled to bond hearings. The House today expected to approve Speaker Pelosi's appointment of a select committee to study the January 6th riot at the Capitol building. She will appoint the chair and 8 of the 13 committee members. House Republican Whip Steve Scalise says the panel will likely pursue a partisan agenda. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Chili's is bringing you a full meal offer with 3 for Me for just $15. You get a beverage, a starter, and an entree. First, choose from a refreshing Coca-Cola or iced tea, pick a starter, then select your choice of a mouth-watering entree, like Cajun pasta with grilled chicken, ranchero chicken tacos, or the savory Santa Fe burger. Dine in today or visit chilisguam.com for delivery and to-go options. Chili's, 3 for Me for just $15. Available for a limited time. Chili's, savor the moment.
The U.S. Supreme Court issuing 2 more rulings Tuesday, and the next to the last announcement expected this term.
The Supreme Court has declined to lift the CDC's pandemic-related eviction ban. That moratorium is set to expire on July 31st. That vote 5-4. Justice is also ruling that people who are deported and then re-enter the U.S. illegally, then claim asylum, have to stay in custody until their cases are handled. And then Thursday, we are expecting the final 2 opinions of the term on voting rights and whether some groups, including many political groups, can be forced to reveal the names of their donors.
Fox's Shannon Bream. About a dozen deaths in Washington state and Oregon may be tied to the intense heat wave that's brought scorching temperatures to the Pacific Northwest. Consecutive days of record high temperatures exceeding 100 have eased in Seattle and Portland, but inland Spokane saw 109 degrees on Tuesday, the highest temperature ever recorded there. One power utility is imposing rolling blackouts because of the heavy demand. The state of California is extending its business travel bans for state employees to several states over political differences.
17, the number of states where California employees and athletes for colleges and universities cannot travel to because California objects to laws in those states that allegedly discriminate against LGBTQ people. So the state attorney general says, quote, make no mistake, we're in the midst of a wave of bigotry and discrimination, and California is not going to support it. Originally, Democrats in Sacramento objected to so-called bathroom bills. The latest outrage for California relates to those laws that prevent transgender girls from participating in sports consistent with their gender identity. So basically, state employees cannot go to conferences in 17 other states.
Fox's William Lajeunesse reports there could be more coming as several states are considering legislation opposed by LGBTQ groups. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tucumán has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. a true taste of Guam.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Hey! Big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community. Get national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Another great halftime show here on Tall Tales. The one thing I wanted to mention on the medical malpractice controversy, I think I explained the fiat judicia ruit caelum position pretty well. For the doctors, you could condense their position into a good news, bad news. And a doctor would tell you if Teresa's bill passes, the good news is that you'll be able to sue a doctor for medical malpractice. The bad news is there won't be any doctors left to sue. That's an exaggeration and an overstatement, but those are kind of the battle lines. And I've mentioned earlier in the show, the winner, the senator that's going to come out winners here is Teresa. Teresa's going to come out looking really good. Bailout Barnes is not going to look so hot when the dust settles. Okay, so that was the editorial that ran in the Post. It took the first hour of the show. Good editorial. And here we go with my blue pencil. The coveted Blue Star goes to the Guam Daily Post. There'll be a hot time in the old town tonight for the Daily News editorial writers. I'm sorry, for the Post editorial writers. Good job, Post. That's 251 blue stars for the Post. Okay, on the card today, I have Matson versus APL. I've got Tom Wood versus Underwood. I've got Michael San Nicolas versus Cattle. Yeah. And Biden versus the United States. I'm afraid that last one's going to be around for a while.
But he doesn't know it.
But he doesn't know it, yeah. And if he did, he'd only whisper about it. Okay, there was an article in today's Daily News. Matson challenges $5 million subsidy to competing container ship. Matson Navigation Company filed a federal civil suit challenging the federal government's decision to subsidize the American President Lines container ship CGM Herodote, which recently was authorized to participate in the Maritime Security Program. APL planned to unveil the Herodote at the Port Authority on June 17, but postponed, then canceled citing Wuhan virus restrictions on events and visual scheduling conflicts. According to Matson, the ship is not legally eligible for the program. Program meaning, let's see here, Maritime Security Program, which I'll get into a little later on. APL alters according to Matson, the ship is not legally eligible for the program, and the annual federal subsidy to its competitor, APL, alters the, quote, competitive balance in this domestic market because Matson's ships do not receive the same subsidy. As a result the MSP subsidies, APL is able to offer significantly lower prices than Matson for shipping cargo on the same routes, driving carriage from Matson to APL. The lawsuit filed June 14 in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia states, the lawsuit filed on June 14 in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia states. The Maritime Security Program, created by federal law in 1996, maintains a fleet of 60 merchant ships that are active in international trade. Each participating ship in the fleet receives a $5 million annual stipend in exchange for making themselves available to support military sea lift requirements during times of conflict or national emergencies. The annual stipend, which is paid in monthly installments, is scheduled to increase to $5.3 million next year. The program will continue till at least September 30, 2035, according to a provision in the military's 2020 budget. There currently is a 60-vessel cap on the program, but the Maritime Administration on April 26 approved a request to remove the container ship APL Guam from the fleet and replace it with the Haradate, which was built in 2007. The Haradate has about 34% more carrying capacity than the APL Guam. The replacement vessel will be reflagged to U.S. registry and expected to begin operations in the first half of May, the Maritime Administration stated. It stated the Haradate, which is owned by a U.S. citizen trust, meets the citizenship requirements for owners and operators of fleet vessels. According to Matson's lawsuit, the Haradate can't replace the APL Guam in the program because neither ship is eligible for the program. The Maritime Security Program is supposed to protect U.S. flagged vessels operating in domestic commerce from unfair competition from subsidized vessels, according to Matson. Although the exception can be granted for maritime ships that provide service to U.S. territory of Guam, there is no exemption for service to Saipan, the lawsuit states. Congress made clear its view that vessels in the MSP should not be operating in domestic commerce. Matson's lawsuit states, domestic trade with Saipan renders the Haradate ineligible for the MSP fleet. Well, then I wonder how the other ship was able to do that. Matson asked the district court to void the April 2021 MARAD, M-A-R-A-D, Maritime Administration order that approved the Haradate's participation and to prevent MARAD from approving the Haradate and paying subsidies to APL. Although Matson sued the Department of Transportation and the Maritime Administration, APL filed a motion to intervene in the case in order to protect its interests. APL's attorneys noted this is the 6th time Matson has sued the Maritime Administration, challenging the agency's decisions to include APL ships in the Maritime Security Program. Matson's past challenges were dismissed because Matson missed a 60-day filing deadline, APL's attorneys stated. So six lawsuits. Yeah, okay. 6 lawsuits. So, here's another line. APL is talking to Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes to see if a mandatory arbitration procedure could be inserted in the law to protect. No. All right, I have an article here that I got from a Honolulu publication called Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. And it talks about the Jones Act. Now, the article didn't mention the Jones Act at all, but Matson is a Jones Act carrier. So long as it complies with the rules of the Jones Act, it is almost free from competition, because when it comes to from Guam, from the mainland to Honolulu to Guam, from New York to New Orleans, whatever, foreign ships cannot carry cargo on those routes. So Matson has a classic example here of a good rent-seeking deal, because there's no competition for Matson on its Guam, Honolulu mainland route. A ship from Korea coming down here with a load of cars can't pick up cargo in Guam, carry it to the mainland, or vice versa. So this article says one of the great disconnects of the Jones Act is that it requires vessels carrying goods between U.S. ports to be U.S. built. But it doesn't say anything about where those vessels must be maintained or repaired. Thus, we have the spectacle of large transportation companies such as Matson, etc., posturing on behalf of the Jones Act, allegedly to protect American shipyards and national security, while at the same time sending their own expensive U.S. vessels to shipyards overseas. And my recollection is that it costs more than double to build a ship in an American shipyard as opposed to a Chinese or Korean shipyard. Ships built in the U.S. are expensive? Indeed they are. Oh, wait a minute. Indeed they are. 4 to 5 times more expensive than ships on the world market. So this is one of the things. If you're going to do Jones Act trade, if you're going to sail between Guam and the mainland, etc., you must do it in a U.S.-made ship, which is going to cost you 4 or 5 times more than a ship that you could buy in Korea or some other place. Probably not coincidentally, there's a dearth of demand for these costly vessels, contributing substantially to the closure of 300 U.S. shipyards between 1983 and 2013, leaving only 4 U.S. shipyards today that are capable of building large ocean-going ships. Since 2000, Jones Act qualified vessels have dropped in number from 193 to 99. U.S. shipbuilders have simply priced themselves out of the world market and possibly would not even exist anymore were it not for Buy America military contracts and the Jones Act's U.S.-built requirement for the domestic U.S. merchant fleet. You might ask, if U.S. ships are so expensive, why do companies such as Matson not oppose being required to buy them? Yeah. The likely answer is they can pass the extra cost onto consumers since they have no meaningful competition. A recent Grassroots Institute of Hawaii study, for example, found that Hawaii residents pay an extra $1.2 billion a year, or about $1,800 per average family because of the Jones Act. $1,800 a year if you live in Hawaii. So if it's $1,800 there, it's probably $3,600 here, right? Because of the Jones Act, eliminating U.S.-built requirement alone would save Hawaii residents annually about $531 million, or about $300 per resident, and add 3,860 jobs. Another likely reason is that higher capital costs make it more expensive for potential U.S. competitors to enter the trade, which suits companies like Matson and another company just fine, since they're already entrenched in the market. As Matson states in its 2019 annual report, if the Jones Act were repealed, substantially amended, or waived, and as a consequence, competitors were enter the Hawaii or Alaska markets with lower operating costs by utilizing their ability to acquire and operate foreign flag and foreign built vessels, the company's business would be adversely affected. As for potential foreign competitors, U.S. companies don't have to worry because of Jones Act's U.S. flag ownership and crewing requirements. But to the extent that they do worry about them, they often argue that without the Jones Act, merchant ships from countries such as China would dominate the U.S. domestic trade because of their lower capital and labor costs. The Jones Act is presumed to be a bulwark against that possibility, with violators facing strict fines or forfeiture of their cargo. So, back to the great disconnect. Will U.S. shipyards and domestic ocean carriers collude to keep the Jones Act in place? The latter actually are undermining the former by sending much of their needed ship repair and maintenance work overseas, mainly to China. They do this even though a separate U.S. law, the Tariff Act of 1930, requires in many cases that U.S.-flagged vessels repaired in foreign shipyard pay a 50% tariff to the U.S. government. The law's intent is to keep U.S. shipyards busy and punish the U.S. company looking for lower-cost alternatives. The tariff clearly is an additional burden on Jones carriers, but it's not enough to discourage companies such as Matson from sending their ships overseas for repair and maintenance. On occasion, U.S. shipyards have complained about the situation. In 2004, for example, Matson received permission from the U.S. Coast Guard to have substantial work done in China on 3 of its Jones Act ships. The work allegedly went beyond typical repairs as Matson paid to have the ships converted to partial roll-on, roll-off vessels used for carrying automobiles. Generally speaking, the Jones Act strictly regulates how much work can be done on a ship in a foreign shipyard before it might be considered rebuilt and thus no longer a Jones Act ship. For example, no more than 7.5% of ships' steel weight may be from foreign components. The Shipbuilders Council of America, Matson's primary, and PASHA, Matson's primary competitor in the Hawaii trade, thought Matson was violating this policy and sued the U.S. Coast Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, and the National Vessel Documentation Center. Matson ultimately was exonerated, but not before 2 lawsuits worked their way through the court. In 2006, Alan Walker, then president of the Shipbuilders Council, opined that Matson has been hiding behind the Jones Act for years to keep foreign competition out of its markets, but then getting pennies on the dollar for repairs in foreign shipyards. They are hypocrites. Yeah. So I mentioned the word rent-seeking, and I thought I had a good definition of it here. Oh yeah, I do have a good definition of rent-seeking. Rent-seeking, it doesn't have anything to do with what you pay your landlord. Rent-seeking is the effort to increase one share of existing wealth without creating new wealth. Rent-seeking results in reduced economic efficiency through misallocation of resources, reduced wealth creation, lost government revenue, heightened income inequality, and potential national decline. Attempts at capture of regulatory agencies to gain a coercive monopoly can result in advantages for rent seekers in a market while imposing disadvantages on their incorrupt competitors. This is one of the many possible forms of rent-seeking behavior. So from what I've read here, I think I'm going to nominate Matson as today's rent seeker. So we talk about the Jones Act a lot here on Guam, and I think there's a really shallow understanding of what the Jones Act actually means. But I think it's fair to say that if the Jones Act did not apply to Guam, it would put more money in the people of Guam's pockets. I could be proven wrong on that, but instead of horsing around with the insular cases and silly things like that, if you want to introduce a resolution, there are bailout barns. How about one dealing with the Jones Act and get a hold of your buddy Grijalva and ask him for some help on the Jones Act? Okay, I'm going to go to Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch, and when I come back, I got a couple of dynamite callers on the line. I've got Charlie Hermosa and the ever-popular Frenchie, who never disappoints.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
So here we go. Wrigley Field in Chicago, the world's most beautiful ballpark. You see a ballpark on TV and you'll notice the outfield wall, signs, advertising. Not Wrigley Field. Wrigley Field's brick walls are covered with ivy. Yeah, it's not even in the Northeast. Okay, and as I'm stumbling around in Wrigley Field, I happen to run into Charlie Hermosa, who is, as I recall, the general manager of APL. So, Charlie, what can you tell us about the Jones Act in Matson?
Yes, how are you, Bob? Thank you for allowing me to come on. Well, I mean, what do you want to know? There's so many different angles we could take, but the one thing that I would start by saying is that I am number one in favor of the U.S. Merchant Marine. Now, having said that, when you look at the Jones Act and what it stands for, the biggest thing that I kind of try to relate to is the fact that, trucks that are being built in Germany move oranges that are being grown in Florida from Florida to New York, and it's okay for those trucks to move oranges. When it comes to flying, it's okay to use Airbus to move cargo from California to New York. But then when it comes to shipping, you can't do that. So, you have an act that's over 100 years old. It served its purpose, and it's time to get revamped. I think Matson, what they're doing now with their latest lawsuit against Marriott, it's pretty evident what they're looking for, right? Obviously, when you look back at historically when Horizon left Guam, their executives came on and went on the news and took out articles and said, we're here for the people, we're not going to raise any rates. And then 2 or 3 months later, bam, you had the first rate increase. And then it didn't stop. It didn't stop for 4 years. Rate increases every 6 months. And, and they had the entire market. So, they kind of blamed it on operational, cost increase. But, I've been doing this for a long time, Bob, and, would love to go head to head and look at those numbers and really explain to me where exactly, those margin levels weren't beyond what they were looking for. So, with the subsidy, what I would say from that point is, where the MSP program is a very important program for the Department of Defense, for MARAD, especially in regions where we need the capability. So, we have a capability. The ships that we run through Guam have the capabilities that the Matson ships don't. We have cranes that allow us to offload containers without, if there's anything that would ever happen to the port where they can't use the cranes, God forbid any major typhoon, we would be there. But we would be there for Guam. We would be there for Saipan. So, if they're their so-called hometown, carrier and so forth, I don't really think they're looking for the best interests of the people right now. I think they're really taking a very aggressive approach to, blatantly do what everybody's thinking in their mind right now that they're trying to do, and which they will, if this doesn't stop, because, the amount of money that's spent on legal fees is almost probably equivalent to the subsidy. So it's absolutely insane to see this happen again. So it's got to stop. And I think I said this to you before. I would love to go head to head with Matson, with their VP, General Manager Bernie. Would love for them to explain to me how the Jones Act, and they're going to throw out, and I can write to you in a piece of paper right now and tell you exactly what they're going to say, and I will be able to refute it because it doesn't make sense. National security gets thrown out like it's just a normal thing. But, if you really look at the national security, we have fallen way back, way back because of the restrictions on the Jones Act on being able to quickly produce and manufacture ships at a pace that we're well being surpassed by other major countries, to include China. So if you really want to go down that path in national security, I think we need to be careful because we are, we're in a critical state right now. Our ships, that the DoD is managing and they're trying to refurbish and so forth are, reaching their lifetime, and we're not producing enough ships to be able to compete against the world. So that's my take on it, Bob.
That's very interesting, Charles. Now, Charlie, as I recall, the Jones Act, 1920, the purpose of it was that we wanted to make sure that the next time we went to war, we had a merchant fleet. So the Jones Act was to protect our merchant fleet so that any coastwise shipping would be on American ships. Isn't that what started it?
Yep, that is correct. They had a huge boom during the First World War, and they had an excess of ships. And Senator Jones, that's how the Jones Act was created up in Washington. They wanted to make sure that they utilized the ships in a way that would strengthen the merchant marine for follow-on wars that may be, and it never changed. It hasn't changed.
And it didn't work, right?
No, and exactly. That's the thing, because obviously World War II was a completely different war than World War I. So, and that whole evolution is going to continue to change. But if you look at the term logistics wins wars is very important to note. And Bob, you're a Marine as well, and you know that logistics can crush any enemy. And I think right now, if the balloon was to go up and we were to go into uncharted waters, I think we would be in a critical state, not being able to support the movement of cargo that we need. So I think we really need to take a look at that. And I think Matson is really walking down a path that we should be looking at Hawaii. We should be looking at Alaska. We really need to look at the Jones Act. And it's not just about Guam, right? It's about Hawaii. It's about Alaska. It's about Puerto Rico. All that has to be looked at. It has to.
So fill me in here a little bit. As I understand it, if a shipping company wants to do the Jones Act shipping, it has to be in a ship that's built in the United States, owned by Americans, and crewed by Americans. Is that correct, Charlie?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I suspect then that means that it's going to be a really expensive ship compared to a ship that's built in Korea, crewed by Koreans or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So
yeah, so so that's a little bit of the difference, because the MSP program allows for foreign-built ships to be reflagged as U.S. flag, but they have to be owned by U.S. and have to be crewed by U.S. Right. So the only difference with the Jones Act there is the ability for us to go out into the market and actually look at different type of ships to be competitive. So when you're constrained on, having to pay $400 million, $500 million to build a U.S. Made ship versus, Korea that can build probably a ship between $50 to $80 million, that's a huge difference.
Wow.
It's a huge difference. So, those are some of the things that we need to really look at, and that's why the Jones Act has to get revamped.
So if I give you a pencil and a piece of paper and said, Charlie, you are entrusted by me to rewrite the Jones Act, what changes would you make?
I would definitely look at foreign-built ships to be able to. And obviously, most of these Jones Act carriers don't want to look at that because right now they control the market. The Jones Act, for the most part, has become a special interest type act because it protects a very small handful of companies. So if we really wanted to project the power that we need to change it. Looking at foreign-built ships, or the subsidies, let it go to the shipyards. Why not look at giving the money to the shipyards so that they can stay competitive when it comes to making ships? That's another part that we can look at. So I mean, we can go down the line there, but those are the two that I would look at: the subsidies for the shipyards and foreign-built ships.
Since there are so few American ships on the ocean, are there very many merchant mariners left in the United States, Charlie?
Oh no, absolutely. We definitely, there was, I believe 2 years ago, they did an exercise to kind of do a quick startup to see where the readiness of the U.S. Merchant Marine was, and I think we kind of fell within like 60%, which was significantly low. So, the Merchant Marine, obviously the unions are always trying to push for more sailors to come on board. The maritime schools continue to pump out officers, deck officers and engineers. So, the capability for us to be able to continue to grow the U.S. Merchant Marine is there. I think that we're very limited when it comes to the number of ships that we can actually manage. So
more ships, more merchant mariners, right?
Right.
And more ships probably means let's buy them somewhere where we don't have to pay 4 times more than we would in the open market, correct?
No, absolutely. And back in the day, the U.S. flag ships were they were the leaders. We were the leaders in the 80s, early 90s in the world. We operated terminals worldwide. We're the ones that opened up terminals. The Sealands, the APLs of the world, the Matsons, the Crowleys, all these folks. And then it just became a very specialized, special interest type of economy. So it's changed. It's changed really. I don't think it's something that it's seen for the people. I think that it's evident what Matson is trying to do here on Guam.
I see. Does APL sail to the West Coast?
We do. So we have we transship our containers via Japan and Korea as well. We use those transshipment ports, and we load them onto larger ships that go back to the West Coast.
I see. Well, I want to stay with this issue. I hope to stir up some issue and to get people to start talking about something other than the insular cases, because what you're talking about here, just the ability for American companies to use ships built in foreign countries could have a dramatic effect on our economy here, couldn't it?
No, absolutely, and that's the way we got to think, right? I mean, it's so easy to say, oh, we got to think outside the box, but there's plenty of ways to protect the U.S. interest. But to be able to look into areas like looking at foreign-built chips. I mean, again, when we look at planes, when we look at trucks, they're all foreign-built, and we have no problem using them over the road and in the air. But in the ocean, there's an issue.
Good points, Charlie. I'm really glad you called in and straightened us out on some of this this stuff, and we're going to follow along. I'm going to keep this on the card for a while, so if there's anything like breaking news or new developments or things you think I ought to know, please give us a buzz or post something on Facebook, okay?
I sure will.
Good talking to you, Charlie.
So much. Thank you, Rob. Thank you.
Okay, so Charlie Hermosa, the manager of American President Lines here on Guam. Okay, so I've got Frenchie and I've got another Joe on the line. And I'm just about time for me to head for Churchill Downs. So maybe I'll head for Churchill Downs and then we'll accommodate Frenchie, and if there's any time left over, another Joe. Sorry, another Joe. We'll get you on.
Busy week? Mescla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Hafide, my name is Adrian Diaz. For Pride Month, I encourage everyone to support the ISA Guam LGBTQ Scholarship at the UOG Endowment Foundation. This scholarship was funded to help the young LGBTQ students achieve their academic goals. With your help, LGBTQ students who are facing challenges will be able to continue their education and make a positive impact on our island. Please visit give.uog.edu or call 735-2957 for more information on how you can empower these future leaders of Guam.
Here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch of Tall Tales for another day. And I'm ably assisted here on the home stretch by none other than Frenchie. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Good afternoon, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing great, Frenchie.
Good. That was a very interesting intervention there, yeah. It's more interesting because every time you listen to the pro-independence people, they keep humping Jones Act, Jones Act, Jones Act, and of course, it's like the insular case. They they look at it from the wrong side of the scope, but that's nothing new. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if there will be any movement on this issue. Okay, so the reason I was calling this morning, I was talking with Ray, and we were talking. Of course, Ray was worried about China, Russia, Iran, and the threat that it poses to the U.S. in general and to Guam in particular. And so my point on this is that actually the biggest challenge we face right now as far as defense is our own generals. And a few months back, when the Biden administration came in and they nominated General Lloyd Austin as a defense secretary, I had warned the listeners that we had to be very careful about this guy. He was the product of positive discrimination. That's the only reason he had his last job under the Obama administration. And he had, which was the chief of the Southern Command, which is a very high-profile position within armed forces. And when he left, he left the place in shambles. He brought division. He brought fear and everything in his department, to the point that the guy that came behind had to do a lot of cleanup, and I don't think it's been fixed ever since. So that's almost 8 years since he retired, and that was pretty bad. So now this guy is the Secretary of Defense, and then we have our chairman of the Joint Chief. We used to be the Army Chief of Staff, General Mark Miley, who was pressed by the House Committee on Defense, and people were asking questions about all those woke policies that would make Jim Moylan very proud. And that came after a terrible hearing with Admiral Gilday, who is the CNO, the Chief of Naval Operation, who basically was trying to explain why he had made it mandatory for the personnel in the Navy to read the book How to Be an Anti-Racist. And it basically forced a one-day stand-down in the whole U.S. Navy to look at white supremacy and its consequences. So then General Mark Milley was asked about all the wokeness and that is going on right now in the armed forces, a number of very capable officers leaving the service because they don't agree with all the politics that's being rammed down their throat right now, which is basically Marxism in a box. And it is fascinating to see that. And, basically the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said that China was a threat, but it was not much more important than climate change, education, and systemic racism. And this is the guy that's in charge of our defense. And this is very much bothering me, because this guy is so woke, he has no idea what time it is. And this is the same guy who, when he was the Army Chief of Staff, had a disastrous record with the rollout of the Army Fitness Test, the ACFT, which was a total disaster. It was basically trying to do cross-training to include women in the physical fitness test. It turned out to be a disaster. They had to bring it back. He's also the guy that was stonewalling the Iraq War report because it was not very glorifying of his performance, who were not seen as being very good during the Iraq War. He also administered a terrible period of crisis of recruitment within the Army, which has still not been resolved to this day, and has actually expanded to the other services except for the Marines. Also, the failures in Afghanistan, he's right in dead center in the middle of it. And then finally, he's done a lot of political posing. Last year, when Trump, during the summer riot in 2020, wanted to use his lawful authority as president to restore order, he opposed the move and basically put his veto to using the National Guards in order to bring back order in those cities that were burning. Then he also apologized for being with the president in Lafayette Square after the arson of that historical church in Washington, D.C. This guy is not a general, he's a politician. And then in January, he defended the absence of the National Guard at the Congress when there was this occupation of Congress by a few yahoos. And it's very, in the meantime, we have foreign countries that are very aggressive, and we have our top generals playing politics with the personnel and everything. His two closest advisors on social issues, one of them is a BLM member. Can you imagine that? You have a avowed Marxist advising the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It is absolutely mind-boggling. And basically, those generals are aging politicos that haven't won a war since 1991, in February 28th of 1991, when we finally liberated Kuwait. Everything else, ever since, all those guys that are being woke in the armed services are a bunch of incapable generals. And when you think that at the end of World War II, we had 5 4-star generals in all the armed forces, right?
Five-star generals.
4. Yeah, you had 1 5-star general, that was MacArthur, and then after you also had, after they left the service, Eisenhower and Marshall that also got a 5-star, but it's a very rare thing in the U.S. Army. But now you have 50 of them, and the Army is half the size of what it was at the end of World War II. So it is very worrisome, and to me, this is a bigger threat to our national defense that China, Russia, or Iran could bring up, because technically, and the front men and women that are serving in the armed forces are very dedicated people. But what we have is that we have created a class of no good politicians posing as generals and admirals. And this is going to need to be looked at very closely and changed as soon as possible.
Well, I think so much of what's going to happen in this country is going to depend on the 2022 congressional elections. Obviously, we're stuck with Biden for a while, but
yeah.
But you know, that's our only hope, and even then, it may be that things have gone so far that we can't turn the ship around and get it back on the right course.
Well, I think we can, but it would take, and there is some positive signs. I mean, you see those parents, even though the Democrats are saying they are being organized by the GOP, you see parents that are just going in the school boards and telling them they are not gonna take this anymore, and I think there is a grassroots movement really from the bottoms up rather than from the top down. And the Democrats, of course, always being dictatorial by nature, have a tendency to always see things from the top down, of imposing their view from the top, even when it is illegal and illegitimate, because there is two things. There is the legality and the legitimacy. Sometimes, you know, in France, the best example of that, it was when de Gaulle went to London in 1940. What he did was illegal, but it was very legitimate as far as continuing the fight against the Nazis. And here we have a converging thing of both illegality and illegitimacy, and that is something that the citizens of this country need to push back on.
I think you're absolutely right, Frenchie. And you know, when you come right down to it, the Army, the Marine Corps, etc., they're only, we have them for two things. They're supposed to break things and kill people. Everything else is a distraction. But the kind of people that we have as leaders now see those things as tertiary at best, that the function of our armed forces is social justice, warriorship, equity, include all of the buzzwords that the left has brought forward. And I just wonder what it takes, you know, how long people can see this going on without becoming very, very angry.
Yeah, I think we are starting to see some of that anger, and I hope it turns into something positive. But when I was listening to that Admiral Gilday the other day, the CNO, and I was thinking, my God, if Admiral Nimitz was alive today, he would kick that guy in the butt all the way out of the chamber. I mean, it's just amazing. But that, unfortunately, is what our poor sailors, Marines, and Air Force and Army personnel have to deal with as leaders, and that is not looking good, at least for the moment.
True.
I hope.
True enough, Francie.
All right, so that was my 2 bits on this.
Well, thank you very much for chiming in, Frenchie. Yeah, so that's Frenchie. And then we've got another Joe on the line who wants to talk about the Jones Act and invasive species. Apparently, because of the Jones Act, we're not importing enough invasive species. Is that it, another Joe?
Somewhere along those lines, but you're talking about Admiral Nimitz. I think, wasn't he in Guam for a short period of time?
For a long period of time. If you go up the Flag Circle, up on Comnav Mar, up on Nimitz Hill, yeah, you'll find the house that he actually lived in during the time that he ran the Pacific War from right here on Guam.
I had a word-of-mouth rumor. Allegedly, he tasted some tuba from on Guam.
Did he what?
From some. Allegedly, word-of-mouth rumor was that some local military types may have, in fact, introduced him to tuba in Guam.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
But I digress. Back to the Jones Act. Doesn't the Jones Act limit, shipments due to limiting shipments from foreign ports? This helps us to stop invasive species. Unfortunately, it didn't do a good enough job to stop the rhino beetle and the giant hornet, Asian hornet.
You're thinking of another Jones Act, I think, another Joe. What the Jones Act says is if a ship sails from Tokyo to Guam, that's fine, foreign commerce. But that same ship can't carry cargo from Guam to Honolulu. Any shipment between 2 U.S. ports has to be on, on a Jones Act qualified ship, which means it has to be built in the United States, it has to be owned by Americans, and it has to have an American crew. Not too long ago, one of the issues was New York and New Orleans. That to get certain kinds of products from New Orleans to New York, relatively expensive by ship, is a whole lot cheaper. And then, of course, Biden suspended the Jones Act after the Colonial Pipeline flap, so that foreign ships could haul oil from Louisiana up to the northeastern part of the United States.
What about ships coming from South Korea, Japan, Asian ports? They cannot come directly to Guam, can they?
Oh yeah. And the Jones Act doesn't have anything to do with invasive species. Let's talk about invasive species tomorrow. I'm hearing that music in the background.
Thanks for your time, Uncle Bob. Appreciate it.
Good talking to you.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Still not finding survivors. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Another frustrating day yesterday for the rescue workers in the rubble of the Florida condo collapse.
Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava gave the sad news that another body was discovered by searchers. So the number of deceased is now at 12.
That leaves 149 people yet to be accounted for. As the debris is searched, it is also being removed by dump trucks and held at another location for future investigation. But Mayor Levine-Cava says finding people alive is still the priority now.
They have been working non-stop, as you know, for nearly 6 days.
On Thursday, President Biden and the First Lady will visit the site and meet with grieving families.
Fox's Gernal Scott. Florida prosecutors say they will impanel a special grand jury to investigate the cause of the collapse. Landlords will be unable to evict tenants over COVID-delayed rent for a few more weeks after a decision from the nation's highest court on Tuesday.
The Supreme Court turned away a challenge to the Centers for Disease Control ban on residential evictions put in place last year to help combat the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. A group of landlords asked the justices to allow a lower court ruling that blocked that eviction moratorium to go in effect nationwide. That moratorium is due to expire July 31st.
Fox's Jared Halpern reports Justices Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Coney Barrett wanted the landlord's challenge to be heard. The House has voted to remove a bust of former Supreme Court Chief Justice Roger Taney from the Capitol building. He was the author of the pro-slavery Dred Scott decision. If the Senate goes along with the House vote, Speaker Pelosi says busts or statues of those who served in the Confederacy will be taken down as well.
Their homage to hate, not heritage, they must be removed.
Wall Street slightly higher Tuesday, the Dow gaining 9, NASDAQ 27. Asian stocks closing Wednesday mixed. America.